I think the other aspect that is really important is planning and conversations with your spouse, if you have a spouse, which is we have this practice where on a personal level, I have a monthly journal and a daily journal with God where, on monthly journal basis, I have God, Vinny, Kaylee and Izzy, work, people, ministry in that order. And then I write down what God has put in my heart for that month. Like, what is the theme of the month?
My favorite part about the Generous Girl podcast is getting to interview incredible people who have lived incredible lives of generosity. And today is no exception. You are going to love hearing from Soomin Hu, who has lived a life of generosity on Wall Street as she's raised her kids and just so faithfully done what God has called her to do in her marriage and in her career. And I know you're going to be blessed. So stay tuned for a great episode of the Generous Girl podcast. Well, today I am joined with someone from completely across the country in New York City. Here I am in San Diego doing this interview with Soomin Hu. And she's amazing. She's had this incredible career on Wall Street in investment banking while she's been a wife. She's been a mom of 2 kids who are teenagers now. And she's got so much wisdom to share that I was so excited to have the opportunity to have coffee with her when I was in New York last month. And she agreed to be on this podcast, but she's got such a heart for generosity. And really her theme is seeing God's faithfulness over the decades through her life. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So you are going to be encouraged and you're in for a treat. So welcome, Soomin.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Hi. Oh, it's so great to have you here. I remember first meeting you, hearing your story a couple of years ago when we were in Colorado at the Celebration of Generosity event. And you and your husband shared a story about God's faithfulness regarding real estate, the pandemic, wondering how if things were going to ever make sense. And it was really one of my favorite stories shared that weekend. So I thought, wow, you would be an incredible podcast guest, and look at God's faithfulness. And here we are today. You're on the podcast. So I'm grateful.
Excited to be here, Kim.
Yes. Well, why don't we just jump in, and how about we start with you telling that story? Because I think that story tells a lot about your background, how you arrived in New York City, and then it also just demonstrates your dependence on God and your obedience also to the things that He's called you to do in New York City.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Korea until I was 14. And that was just kind of your usual middle class kind of family of 4, mom and dad, and I had a younger brother. Life was kind of as usual of a family of 4 back in Korea. Our family decided to immigrate to U.S., and it was a sort of another typical immigration story of to give, mom and dad wanting to give a better future for their children. So we immigrated when I was 14. Then a year from there, life sort of dramatically changed. So, that sort of, before we kind of get into that, it's just for a year of immigration, it was just, okay, I'm, learning in English, I'm going to school, I'm in a different country, but it was just, as a family, we got to spend the first year, because my mom and dad weren't working at the time, as a family, really kind of having a lot of quality time, kind of let's do this life together, let's learn and build a new life in America. So that was a great first year. And then one day, everything sort of changed. And I still remember that day very clearly. So I was 15 years old at this point. It was a year into immigration. And I got a phone call from my dad's friend. And it was, the voice on the other end basically told me, hey, your dad got into a car accident and he died on the scene. And I remember collapsing on the floor. I remember just kind of going like, just utter shock. Like, right. What does that actually mean? Like, I didn't really know how to register that. So like I said, I'm the older sister. I had a younger brother, and 2 of us were home alone because my mom actually was out on a business that day for some reason. And so somehow everyone kind of got connected, and I had, my aunt who lived in New York came down and took care of us, and sort of life from there was just basically, day to night different. So I've always been a daddy's girl. So like I said, back in Korea, no, but for 15 years it was, kind of we did everything together. I just remember walking in the rain with dad. I remember learning everything from dad. So on that night, I remember praying to God and saying like, okay, like what am I going to do without my dad? And he was very clear in his voice to say, I'm going to be your earthly dad and heavenly dad. And I just still remember it so clearly.
Wow.
Because and you hear this from a lot of Christians when they're going through a really, really difficult time, when you go, it's unbearable, loss or suffering or sadness. But sometimes that God feels the closest. And you have this peace that come over you that you can't explain and go like, how am I the most peaceful today among many other days that you've had in your life? And that's just what I remember feeling like, okay, I am going to be okay. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to be okay because I've lost my earthly dad. But like, who can be a better dad than my heavenly Father? And he's proven that throughout my life, which I'll share a little bit. So for the next few months, it was just talking to the police because it was actually a hit and run accident. I mean, can't get worse. So it was. So I remember going to the police station. I remember talking to lawyers. Like I had to arrange all of the funeral and the services because remember this was a year into our immigration, so we didn't know how things were done. I had no families around other than one aunt that was in New York. My mom didn't speak any English. So like I became an adult, right? So I had to come in. It was at least among the family. I wasn't even fluent, but like, I knew the most English as a 15-year-old. So I had to sort of do a lot of those arrangements. So the few months passed very quickly, just arranging life, like logistics, death certificate, like closing accounts and moving things and etc. So that's sort of a few months passed. Then I think the financial started hitting us, right? So as I mentioned, my parents weren't working at the time, but we were kind of living off of our savings that we brought on, and they were just kind of thinking about like, do we set up a new business, or do we, where do they go work, and etc. So before all of that were set up, kind of like my dad that passed away. So then we just became really poor very quickly. So right, because no one was earning income. Our savings were kind of down to the zero.
You're going to school. Your brother's going to school. Mm-hmm.
My mom kind of sort of, got into a bit of a depression. So she wasn't really working and out there. Our family just moved to New York to live with my aunt because we had no other means to kind of survive. And then soon after that, I started working. So started working in the doctor's office as an assistant, dental office as an assistant, and was sort of making a living to support my family from kind of that age on. And I think that's, as much as the life was very difficult from a not having enough, but I think one thing that I knew I was clear, and during this time when after I moved, I wasn't, even really that, consistent going to church. Like the life was just kind of all over the place, to say. But one thing I knew was, okay, I don't know how I would live my life without God every single day. And because of that, I think part of that that's when I decided to kind of kept on tithing through that period. And this is where the generosity sort of comes in. And I wouldn't say at the beginning it was like out of a generous heart. It was just more that I need a connection to God. I want to listen to him, and I want to, kind of connect with him. So that was sort of my way of doing that, which is like, I know that, whether I have money or I don't have money, like I can't live without God. So I'm going to give that 10%, out of my lunch money, out of my dinner money, out of like our rental money, because I know that, he's the one that's going to take care of me regardless whether I have money or not. So, and then that's when, so God taught me sort of how to like submit my finances all together. So from that point on, I felt like even though we had no money, and as I was starting to make sort of a real money, it just was never mine, because I was like, okay, all kind of, it sort of came out of having nothing,
right,
to say it's all yours. So it actually became quite a good discipline and became an easier. And people kind of ask me these days and kind of go, like, how do you sort of get into that discipline? Like, how are you, working through that generosity? And I go, it's actually when you start generosity, when you have nothing, it's actually
that's right.
So that was, that's sort of been my journey. And let me tell you how sort of God's been faithful through that. So,
well, let me just interject here, because that was really what hit me when I heard your story, was that you did feel compelled to tithe at 15, whether it was your salary or your money from the doctor's offices, and you were helping your mom make it, your brother. And, in my role, I work with these different nonprofits, and I frequently hear, though, especially people like when they get married, when they begin from the start of their marriage, tithing and understanding it's not theirs, and God, they're just stewards and what He's given them to steward. It always really is this thread of watching God do amazing things, rather than the reverse of like, when I make more, then I'm going to be generous, and then I'm going to give, and then I'm going to tithe, because it actually is much harder at that point than, like you said, starting with nothing. You realize He owns it all. He's given me any penny I have, and kind of the least I can do is give back to Him, the 10% or more that He has given to me to steward. And that part of your story, just all that you had gone through, and losing your dad, learning English in a foreign country, becoming citizens, like everything involved with that. It's like I put myself in your shoes of somebody dropping me in South Korea, and how would I navigate that? Like, that's remarkable, all of it you did through that. So anyways, keep going. But
it's all God's
amazing.
grace. I mean, I don't think I knew how to do anything. Like, I didn't know how to speak English. I didn't know how to work at doctor's office. I didn't, like every single thing. And God has given me wisdom. He's given me ability. He's opened doors. And I'll talk about all the doors sort of He has opened, because seriously, like when I talk about anything when it comes to whether generosity or my career, I go, every single door God opened and God closed. And I think it stemmed from, that sort of tiding out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And when you surrender, it is, whether God is giving you a good job or a bad job, God is giving you, opening doors here and there, you sort of walk through it with Him. And I think that's sort of I am grateful for that lesson earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I did everything right, but I think that's been sort of how I've seen God faithful throughout my life.
Mm-hmm.
So where it started with that, which is like crazy story after crazy story, which is I sort of got thanks to Korean, like math discipline. Everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows that all the, yes. So I learned a lot. I think I learned everything up till 14 that I had to learn in math to go to college effectively. So I got a perfect score on my SAT, and that opened door for me to go to college. Because otherwise I didn't really, then I had to get into debt and all the financial aid. But one of the engineering schools gave me a full scholarship on the back of the math score. It was like, okay, I think you're clearly, you're good at math. And so they invited me in. So I was able to go to school. 1 year into school, I get an email from this investment bank, like world's premier investment bank. And then said, hey, do you want to come for an interview? I didn't apply for the role, Kim. I didn't know what the company did.
Mm-hmm. Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. So I just get an email to my school inbox that says, do you want to come in for interviews? I'm like, I'm trying to still make money. I'm supporting my business. I'm supporting my family. Sorry. So I'm like, of course. So I went into the interview, and they asked me a bunch of questions. And then I said, okay, like, you have the job. And I remember everyone around me, including my mom, going like, that's amazing. This is like one of the best places you can work for. And I'm like, okay, well, I see, I'll see what happens. I remember going into the office on the first day and walked into my manager's office and said, is this like internship paid? Because if it's not, I can't work here. Right? Like, I'm just trying to like
Right.
make a living here, right? So like, I don't really care what this firm is. Like, if I am, getting paid, then I can continue to work. And I think there was a misunderstanding of how I'm supposed to be connected to HR and stuff. And they were like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Like, yeah, it is a paid internship. Like, here is an HR contact. We need to get you contacted immediately, and etc. So that was funny. And I find out that the wage, the hourly wage they're going to give me was double what I was making. So fell off my chair, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And okay, continue to tithe, continue to sort of be listening to God into that. So that's sort of how I was able to support myself through college, continue to support my family. So, me able to continue to push the higher education was sort of, I think, through that, for sure. And then I would say that door opening sort of continued to happen. So when I entered that workforce at this investment bank, I was sort of, you would call that sort of the bottom of the ladder. Now, what I mean is not just an analyst, but I was on help desk supporting, the clients of this investment bank. And you're talking about like full on support desk, which is like answering phone calls, mailing letters. You can sort of say I worked in a mailroom, right? Like it was a sort of a technology.
Mailroom on Wall Street.
Mailroom on Wall Street, for sure. And from there, God sort of kept opening doors in terms of the next job that I could do. And people approached me to kind of do a different job. And I think where I am today, as I mentioned, is just God continuing to open doors through different opportunities. And some were good and some were more challenging. But there was always a job at the end of that, which is, whether God wanted me to work on a culture of a place, or God wanted me to witness to a people in that place, or God wanted me to share my story in those places. And it was always, for his glory and for his kingdom, to say, okay, why am I here? Why are you opening this door for me? What am I supposed to do here? Was always sort of my, way of sort of working with God throughout those places. And I think as I was entering the first job, the first full-time job, I think what people told me around me was this, which was like, oh, that's such a great opportunity. Like, you're going to make so much money. And then I immediately kind of heard, I was like, like that's a warning sign. Like, what does that mean? That I'm going to make a lot of money? And I found out that it's not the salary that matters on Wall Street. It's the bonus that matters on Wall Street, which is like your salary might be similar to what you get paid elsewhere, but the Wall Street bonuses are really big.
Right.
So at the beginning of my full-time work, I committed to give away 50% of that bonus. And that was a way of me putting guardrails around me, because you hear so many stories, including the Bible, where it says,
sure.
you know what, like money can be used for good or bad, but it is definitely could be a deterrent and, from you pursuing God. And like that rich young man who couldn't sell everything to go follow Jesus. Like, I don't want that to ever to happen to me. So it was my way of just kind of saying, okay, I'm going to sort of give away 50% of my bonus per year. And that was sort of how I would say was the start of my generosity journey.
And then I remember in your story when you went through, was it orientation is when you met your husband? Or when did that happen? Because that's a great story too.
So both of us started at this bank at the same time, and we were part of a analyst program. So at the time, they hired about 100 of us globally in technology. And my husband was hired into a London office, and I was hired into a New York office. They got all of the analysts from all over the globe, 100 of us, and kind of got them to spend 7 weeks together in New York. So we were in the same class of like a small 14. We were in the same cohort. So we spent like 7 weeks in a classroom together. And that's where I met him. So one day, I think I was wearing a cross necklace at the time. So Vinny, I think a couple of weeks maybe into the program, he approached me and he said, "Hey, are you a Christian?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And it's rare you run into a Christian in this investment banking place. So I was just like, my eyes lit up and I was like, "Yes, I am. Are you?" And we started talking. And I find out that he just became a Christian like 6 months before he joined this program. And he was just on fire. So he was like he was the Spirit's prompting every day. He was listening, he was hearing God. He was witness to a homeless person. Like just God was really big and, really was honoring his kind of surrender to follow God. And I was just so fascinated and so drawn and so attracted to, how the man he was becoming and being part of that journey. And that's how we got together.
So great. And here you are, fast forward all these years later with 2 kids and still in this New York City, New Jersey area. So such a beautiful story how God brought you together. And now let's fast forward to the story during the pandemic. And he's doing Zoom calls from the bathroom, and he's working for an iBanking firm, and you're doing your job, and you've got your kids, and you're 4 people in a small condo or apartment, and you're thinking that you want to buy a house and get out of that environment.
Yeah. So, by the way, when I shared, when we got together and I told him, hey, like I'm giving away 50% of that bonus. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that too. So meaning, obviously we combined the finances, but isn't it perfect, God, that who brings kind of people aligned together. And we just kind of never thought about money. Like we were always aligned, and God was taking him through the journey too, which I'm sure, he has shared it at COG as well as in different places where, God walked him through a similar journey of surrendering his finances to him. So when we got together, it was just all about like, how do we do this better? How do we do this together? Sure. Not like being on a different page, which I think was really important. So
very important.
The foundation.
No, that's so true.
Yeah. So because of that, I think because we were sort of giving away a chunk of our bonuses, like, we weren't increasing our lifestyle. We didn't have a big house as the family was growing. So to your point, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey. We saved up money to upgrade our house. So it was like, okay, like our kids are becoming bigger and maybe they, we can kind of get a 3-bedroom apartment instead of 2. And then, they can have a room each, or we can have a room for our guests and have more space for everybody. And this is when our church was starting a home initiative, which was to purchase a building for the church, not to turn it into a temple, but to be a community center for all of Hoboken. Our church was growing so fast that we were part of Hoboken Grace, I think maybe 3 or 4 from a start of the church, and they were adding about 100 people per every year. So we were meeting in a gym of this school, and we were doing free services, and we were like steaming out of the space. So we really, as a church leadership, got called that we were going to raise funds to buy a permanent kind of a community center for our church to meet, as well as for us to share the space with the community. So that campaign was a home initiative. And it's funny that it's called home because, the story it was all about home, like finding home in God. And as we were looking to upgrade our place, like I said, we put our current place on the market. And it was, because we were going to sell our place and then buy a place, obviously. And we kind of started feeling a nudge in our heart. I was like, maybe that's not what we were called to do, but we're like, we're going to do it. Like, so we put it on the market, and it was like a perfect apartment, well staged, in a good price range, 0 offers. And we put a timeline on ourselves to say, I remember it being like 1 month or 2 months, because we agreed that, okay, we're not sure exactly what God is calling us to do, but we are going to take this step, but we're going to put a time box on it. So if we don't have a God clearly opening doors here in a month or 2, then we're going to take it off the market. We tell that to the broker. We're not lowering prices. We're going to take it off the market after this period. So, and God could not have been more clear. I was like, okay, no, you're not selling this place. You're not upgrading place. You're giving that money to church. So
the entire amount you'd saved that you were planning on using to buy the next place, he said, give that to the church home building campaign. And you did.
So we we took that, money and we gave to the home initiative. And it's the best decision we've made for sure. And the amount of peace and joy that we had doing that was amazing. Then the pandemic hit and it was really, 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 really tough. So like I said, it was a 2-bedroom. Vinny taking Zoom calls from the bathroom. All the girls are home. They're doing homeschool. There isn't enough space. And, God has been very clear. It's like, as you're taking step of this faith, like I'm going to do something beautiful on the back of that. And not that, it's a, give and get, but it's
sure.
It was, I sort of trusted in the promise that, okay, he's going to take care of us. And we, I think fast forward, as 2 years after that, when the home initiative was kind of wrapping up, Vinny gets a phone call from a realtor. He doesn't, first of all, recognize the phone call. He was like, who is this? He has a phone call. And it was a realtor that was representing a duplex apartment in our building. So it's the same building. So we were living on a second floor in a 2-bedroom apartment. And then it was a realtor representing the owner of the 5th and 6th duplex apartment. And he called Vinny to say, hey, I think this person is trying to sell, but she remembers hearing that you guys might be interested if this unit ever comes into the market. And she wanted to give you a first look before we put it to the market. Are you interested? And he was like, okay, well, we're interested, but for how much? Because we can't afford, we were saving up and God was blessing us, even after giving the money, we were just kind of diligently saving up. It was like, we can't afford, that big of a space. We were never looking to double our space, right? We were looking to add one small bedroom to our apartment. That was it.
And I remember when he told the story, he was like, after you gave that money, he said, he gave the money, felt like you said, glad that you did. But then he said he became obsessed with the real estate. And he's checking Zillow. He's doing that all the time. And finally, he's like, I'm going to do a fast from real estate, and stopped entirely. And it was during that time that this person reached back out to him.
For sure. Yeah. That is also Vinny's story of he always fasts before a major decisions or as he's giving things up. And I think God has always been very faithful with that too. So he knew sort of immediately when he got the phone call, I was like, hold on, is this sort of coming from God? And I think, and it was because when he asked about how much, normally it would be double our, current place, right? Because it's a double space.
Right.
But what happened was that one of the units in our building sold, at a pretty kind of a low price, just a couple months before that. And the reason, and it was sort of it's a fast sell and they didn't want to wait for the price and they, some previous, kind of offer fell through. So they wanted to do that. So they did that. And so this realtor was like, hey, just for comparables, in that unit just sold, 3-4 months ago. So we're going to use that price per square feet.
For the comps.
That would be the price. And of course, me at this point fell off the chair because that means we will probably get the unit 30% off the, probably a current price. And we weren't challenging that. We were just kind of going, oh my goodness,
right.
I guess that is a fair comparable price as of recent. So that's how God has really blessed us with a home as we were giving to his home. He kind of more than graciously gave us this beautiful home we're living in Hoboken right
now. Oh, it's just, when you gave that money away to the home building campaign, you did it with no strings. Okay, Lord, you're asking us to do that. And like you said, not to give to get, but God, you just can never outgive God. And he's so fun and loving. And he's like, watch, I'm just going to blow your socks off. And I know you just wanted one more room, but let's just double the square footage at a price you never would have dreamt of with a view of the city. And here you are today. So beautiful, Soomin. And I just love how you and your husband have been really united financially through your marriage, because often that can be a really tough area for many marriages, the getting on the same page just with the, whose assets are who makes more money, that can be a stumbling point as it is. But to be on the same page with the generosity component it's just another level of living where you do realize like God owns it all. It's none of it's ours. We're just stewards. And how can we best, steward this so that when we stand before him in heaven and I just think we're going to be blown away by each dollar that we gave back to him. We're going to think, well, it did this, but then he's going to show just the ripples and we just can't even imagine, I think, what happened with the holding those kinds of things, open-handedly. And then when we mess up and we don't do that, he's so gracious to give us another chance and try it again. And yeah, it's just really a beautiful journey. And I'm fortunate in my role to, get to work with many generous couples, generous families. And then they want to involve the next generation of their kids. And how do you do that? And how do we, give away our wealth and then preserve the wealth and then not give too much wealth to our kids? Just all the different nuances, especially as we talk about the great wealth transfer that's happening right now. And there's a lot of like thought leadership that is going into it. But I think at the end of the day, starting where you started this podcast of when you realize that he owns it all, then everything just really does flow from that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want to touch on one other category while you're on this show. And that is, I love how you and Vinny have approached God for the seasons while you both had very demanding careers as you've raised your kids. Anything you'd like to say to that with how you approached in prayer? Okay, God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go back full time? Do you want me to quit? Do you want me to go part time? Do you want Vinny to stay with the kids? Because I think all of us, as we're raising kids and when we're called to the marketplace, it's a challenge, and it looks different for every family unit or the single mom who's navigating, her own journey. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So when Vinny and I were called to this work on Wall Street, both of us, felt a strong calling to this marketplace and to say, and for me, I remember telling God, like, God, I don't want to work in investment bank. Among other things that I've mentioned to God, I was like, I don't want to work here. I know I've been interning here for a long time at this point, but can you give me a full time somewhere else? And I remember him clearly telling me, like, because you don't want what people here want is exactly why you should be here. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the ambition to go up the ladder. I don't have an ambition to make a lot of money. And this place is just full of, that is what drives people to come to work. And the fact that I surrender finances to God, so every money I make is really his anyway. So I think that was sort of why God wanted me to hear. So both of us felt very strong calling to this place on Wall Street in general from an industry perspective. So then it became really hard when the kids were born, because the demands on the job here is like, they'll take every minute of your life away from you if you can give it to them. So as the responsibilities grew at home, responsibility grew at work as well. We were both doing very well at work. So it became to a point where, okay, like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 1. And there's only one of us, and there's only X amount of hours in a day. How do we actually manage this? So, I asked God probably on a monthly basis, should I continue to work? Mm-hmm. I know you call me to this place, but do you still want me here? 15 years fast forward as a full time, I did quit. So, because I think what was happening was I felt that I was not prioritizing what was important in life. What are the main priorities? Main priorities are God first, Vinny next, and Kaylee and Izzy, who are my 2 girls. And then everything else is below that, even as any ministry callings, mm-hmm. including my work, generosity callings, all those things were kind of below those key priorities. And because I saw marriage and kids as the higher calling of my ministry. And so if I'm not doing those right, that means everything else needs to fall below. So then I resigned from work in 2015, and my intention there was, okay, I'm going to be a stay-home mom. Like, I walked out of it and I went, okay, Like, this is it. I think this is where my career ends. Like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom for the next 8 months. Too, all I did was, well, sleep. And then, sleep, learning to cook, serving my husband and being a stay-home mom and learning to cook, as I mentioned, and picnics all day long, every day with my kids. And that's how I spent 18 months. And I really pursued God, and to try to kind of kindle my relationship with Him to be intimate and to be loving. And I wanted to just really get to know Him deeper and more intimately. So every hour that my kids were at school was how I spent spend time with God and in prayers and in the reading of His Word and kind of getting to know Him better. So 18 months passed, and this was probably my biggest wrestle with God. Both of my kids were in full-time school at this point, 18 months later, and I felt like there was some time that I could make better use of my time. So I started praying to God, who do you want me to love? Where do you want to use me? And that prayer kind of started, over the summer before both kids went to full-time. And as I was praying for who do you want me to love? God was like, people on Wall Street. I was like, no, wrong answer.
I'll love anybody, but that's why I'm telling you, I've learned in my, different seasons of life, it's always better to pray, well, anything but going to Maui, Lord, or anything but,
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. That's a good prayer. So I think, prayed for that. Went back to work, kind of kicking and screaming a little bit, but I did go back to work. God opened every single door. I asked for part-time. I asked for, certain arrangements. I asked for different things, and answer on the back of the line, on the back of that phone call was like, yes, 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 yes. So there was no blocker that I could put in front of God that God didn't remove for me to then say, okay, fine. Like, okay, I am going back to work. So I went back to work part-time, and let me share one story as we're talking about God's faithfulness, which is, maybe 2 years into my part-time job, the position opens up where the work asked me if I could go full-time. And I said, I don't know, like I just didn't think about it. And I started praying. And as I was talking with Vinny was like, okay, I actually feel called to ministry, and I think I am leaving corporate work. So at the time, we prayed as a family, and we decided that I was going to go full-time, and Vinny was going to then resign and stay home with the kids while working at church from a volunteer basis, but join the staff anyway. So that was a decision. And that prayer, as I mentioned, there was lots of prayer, and there was a prayer answer, and I decided to then go full-time. Then the confirmation that I get from God is I tell work, and then it's like next week a paycheck hits my account, and paycheck is my account, and there's like a 6-figure paycheck in my account. And then I come back to work the next day, and I go, I think there was a mistake with HR. Like, I don't know what's happened. And my boss and HR both tell me that, oh, it's not a mistake. We actually backdated your full-time to the beginning of the year. And Kim, this was November. I decided to go full-time in November.
Wow.
So, and I knew once again that was God, right? Like, investment banking firm doesn't think of ways to give you more money. That's not what they're known for.
Right. That is amazing.
Yeah. So that's sort of like how God's been so faithful. And by the way, we didn't keep that money. We gave it all back to God. Because
of course you did.
But generosity has been this fun thing with God where, like, He will sometimes use it as a confirmation or answer to our prayer or something. But I know that is from God, and it is not mine to give. God's just using us as a funnel, and there's a ministry that is waiting for that. So then we'll just go, okay, like, we're the funnel. So, like,
here we go.
A paycheck that came out of nowhere that I did not deserve. Nor did I work for it. So here it is, giving back to God.
Wow.
That is
but
like
He trusts you. He's seen your faithfulness back to Him, and He trusts you. And then he just lavishly keeps pouring more on you so that you can be that funnel. And it's just such a beautiful story. And I'm so glad that you have been on this podcast to share. It's wonderful. Thank you for your vulnerability, transparency, just sharing the hard times, that you went through when you were 15, the loss of your father. And yet through all of the ups and downs of life, the thread of you wanting to please God, wanting to be obedient to what he's, put in your path, and be the best wife you could be, the best mother, best person on Wall Street with your skills and talents, and, all for his glory, not for your own. So I think that you just really epitomize the picture of a generous life and how you have stewarded so well your time, your talents, and your treasures. So is there, as we wrap up, and we'll have you share, favorite Bible verse, book that you're reading, or bargain, is there any, what would you like to say to encourage the listener out there who might be struggling with career and balancing young kids, and, how they're wired and their gift mix, and just all the things that women struggle with as, trying to do it all, trying to be faithful to God, and, wanting to use our calling, but also realizing there are seasons of life. Like you said, seasons where you were part-time, seasons where you were at home or you were full-time.
Yeah. I would say, of course, you're seeking God and your God's wisdom, and you're in front of him with his word and talking to him. But I think the other aspect that is really important is planning and conversations with your spouse, if you have a spouse, which is, we have this practice where on a personal level, I have a monthly journal and a daily journal with God, where, on monthly journal basis, I have God, Vinny, Kaylee and Izzy, work, people, ministry, in that order. And then I write down what God has put in my heart for that month. Like, what is the theme of the month? And I review that on a very ongoing basis with God through the daily journals and prayers to go, okay, how am I doing? Like, I really wanted to make sure that I was having conversation with Kaylee about this. Like, did I actually have time to do that? So I do, as much as I don't talk about that as much, like I do plan, and I am strategic about how I approach that. As well as there is I think intentionality is really important, and really the only way I've seen you can balance the demands of life, to your point, which is, if you're not intentional about it, and we talk about this from a money perspective, money will leave your account if you're not intentional about every dollar. Time will leave you if you're not intentional about your time. Right.
Yep.
And so I am really intentional with the time that we don't have enough for everything. And then the fact that we're spending time, and the biggest time I prioritize is that plan, which is annually, Vinny and I take an entire day to do plan for an entire year, which is not days, but like, okay, what are our strategic themes on these areas of importance? What are we trying to teach our kids? What are we trying to do in our marriage? What are we trying to do with our ministries? And we plan that for the year. And we talk about our giving, we talk about our budget, we talk about our vacation, we talk about our kids. And so we do that intentionally. And we then meet on a monthly basis. We have a board meeting on a monthly basis, Nina and I, for a couple of hours, that we sit down and we review that on a monthly basis.
So great.
And like I said, on personal level, I do that myself on a monthly basis and review with God on a daily basis. So I would say that would be my biggest advice
that's wonderful.
For the listener. To be really intentional about that. Things won't happen without you actually planning for it.
Right. That's so great. I love that, Soomin. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad that you shared that. Okay, so I'm sad we're at the end of our time, but I've just been so blessed by your story, and I know that all the listeners will be so blessed. And what is your favorite Bible verse?
It's Matthew 6:33, I believe. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. I use that verse or pray that verse on every decision. Which school should my kid go to? Am I seeking his kingdom and his righteousness first? Which ministry should we give it to? Am I seeking? And same thing with work opportunities. So I think that's always been my life verse in that way.
Wonderful. And then a book that you're reading, I believe it's by Jenny Allen.
Untangle Your Emotions. I I am wired a little bit more, if you can tell already, a little bit like I'm very logical and I'm very
Right.
practical. So I want to make sure I am nurturing my emotional side, and that book has been wonders. And I haven't finished yet, but I'm loving it.
Oh, I've seen it for sale. I think in Hobby Lobby, I've seen it there. But
Yeah.
she's a great author. So thanks for sharing. And finally, I know you're a big online shopper. You don't have a lot of extra time, but any website you love or any clearance section, any tip you want to pass on?
I mean, I would say there's just a couple of, I try not to waste too much time on shopping. So I just have like, okay, here are my three, favorite stores. And, every month, and I'll just go look at the sale and clearance section of those stores. I know exactly what my size is. I know exactly what colors work for me. And I'm very efficient when it comes to shopping as well.
I bet you are. I bet you are. Oh, well, wonderful. Well, thank you again for just sharing your generosity journey. I mean, I know we talked about the 5 pillars on this show. I think you have so emphasized faith, finance, family, and then I know you've got a robust community of friends, not only outside of your workplace, but at your church. And it's just beautiful to watch you and Vinny navigate what God's called you to do in the mission field in which, where you both live. So thank you for being with us. God bless you. And God bless you as you plan out for 2026 and all that He has for you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's been so fun. Thanks for having me, Kim.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.